Welcome to the Echo Sportscast.
I'm Paul McLean.
And I'm Dave Dale. I think this is number 32.
Yeah.
Right on. Today we have Adam Dennis with us. He's President and Director of Hockey Operations for the North Bay Battalion. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
There's a couple things we want to learn more about, recent drafts, and some of your players are up for NHL draft. And we'll talk about the NCAA eligibility rules and a few other things, and including women's hockey somehow.
Love it. Let's go.
Where do you want to start?
You know what? The draft is pretty recent. I'm happy to start there if you want to. We felt it was a really successful day, and I think it should be stated that I think most teams would think it was a successful day immediately after the fact, but we spent a lot of time on this draft, and I feel like we got the player that we wanted at 6th overall that we thought was the first overall pick, and the defenseman that we got in the second round. We thought that he was one of the best defensemen in the draft, and you know, the value that we were getting on guys all throughout. I'd say even Jax Pereira, we were talking about him in the second round if Carter Kunapaski's not there, and Cole Rugdenhill we had as, you know, one of our top goalies for the draft, and he was there in the 5th round. Lincoln Edwards, another one, and I think it was an interesting priority selection, just given it was a record number of American-born players taken, which I think we'll probably talk in the NCAA eligibility thing. But we decided that we were going to stick with our homegrown Ontario guys, and what that meant was you take 87 American players. Well, that moves in some cases an Ontario-born player down 4 rounds than when he should have been. So there's 16 taken in the first 3 rounds on day one, and it turned into, you know, guys we had high on our list that we thought were going to go sooner that were all of a sudden there in the later rounds. So should bode well for the future. Now the work really starts with Johnny and myself just trying to find homes for the guys that won't necessarily be in North Bay next year, but we'll see a couple of years down the line.
And you picked up a North Bay guy.
Yeah, we did. Smitty was a guy that I thought was great throughout. I thought he stepped up in the NOHAs. He scored some big goals for his team, and you know, he plays our style of game. He
is it Logan?
Yeah, Owen. Yeah.
Okay.
So he's a guy that you know, plays our style. You know, he's going to need a good year at 16 to develop somewhere. So that's something that we'll discuss when we get to development camp. But a guy that was you know, I'd say one of the better players in the North all season. We were able to draft Carter Buckman as well out of the U18 program, and I mean, it was a real nice story for us just because we've known Carter since he was, you know, a young kid just trying to cut his teeth in hockey, and they started building Anthony Romani. They took on Zach Weigel at the end, and we've seen the work that Carter's put in at the gym, you know, at our camps. He's always volunteering at our hockey school, and just doing all those things that we as the battalion really appreciate. And he's a guy that had a good season with the U18s, and you know, he was good at the NOHA, at the OHL Cup, I should say. And you know, we're able to grab him with a late pick, so we're lucky enough to do that. And any time that we can support a local guy, we would love to do so.
Oh, right on.
Logan Coates, is the one in the U18 draft. There's
Logan.
Okay,
I mixed him up.
Yeah, so Logan Coates was drafted in the U18 draft, and you know, you could have made a strong argument that he would have been a draft last year, and I mean, with that being said, not everybody gets picked, and what you do with it's really important, because Logan went out and he had a great season. He was the goalie of the year in the North, and you know, he's a guy that has a lot of size and athleticism, and when you work hard, there's a lot that you can do with that. So we're excited to have him in our system and work with him, especially being close to home.
That was a really cool moment too, getting told by his billet, like you guys had Romani call him up.
Yeah, we're working on the production of that. I think I had the 2 phones dueling with each other to try and get them, but you know, it was something that we thought might be an option, so I just had Zach and Anthony prepped. I know Rome's had a game that night, so making sure didn't want to interrupt his pregame routine, but both were thrilled for Carter. I know Anthony was specifically bugging me leading up to the draft. He's like, "Hey, so Carter's had a pretty good year. What do you think?" You know, like, Yeah, we watched. So, but it was, you're right, it was a nice thing and something that I don't think our players realize the impact they have on the little billet brothers and sisters until these moments happen. But it was pretty cool, not just to hear them, but Carter's reaction to hear his billet brothers.
I had heard too from, I was talking to Razor, I guess, that the draft went really fast. Almost like record time to complete it. So that tells me that lots of teams are really prepped. What goes into, maybe like kind of touch on, I know it's a lot for between the mock drafts and everything. Well, just, I mean, the draft in general, like what, for people that wouldn't know, like what's the prep work that you and your team go through to get ready for that draft and draft day?
So I'd say that, we're lucky that we've got a staff that's been together for a couple of years. So I'd say between Charles Abbott, myself, John Winstanley, Jeff Bateman, Ryan Oulahans, we've always wanted to keep him looped in on the draft, but we've had a group that has been able to kind of refine the process year over year and figure out what works, what doesn't. This year, with the new title changes, Johnny took on a bigger lead, like in terms of communicating with the agents and setting up our meetings. What we do is for any of the guys that we're considering, in day one, which this year was picks 6 and 29. So kind of target our list that we want to make sure that we have a face-to-face with those guys, because those are the guys that you'd be considering that can play with your team right away. I think it's really important to have those kind of communications, because in most cases, first time away from home, how do you communicate with adults, to be honest with you? We've had kids in the past that are great communicating with their teammates, but an adult walks in and now they don't say anything. So I think those things that we really want to figure out, we want to know kind of what makes them tick, and see if there's any things that may not mesh with our program, or in more cases than not, it's like just the such a feel-good meeting that nothing specific about it, just a young person that's able to have a really good conversation and does all the things away. He has good morals, good character. That's really important for us for those initial picks. We do cover off probably about 120 interviews based on our scouts. We'll have another tier of guys that may play in the league in a year that our scouts will have a questionnaire for and ask some questions and give us some feedback. And then we do a lot of mock drafts throughout. I found that process to be really valuable. It's a document that I've had. We do a lot of mock drafts just individually as a scouting staff, so it's fun too. You'd like it, you'd be sitting watching the Leaf game, and I have a rule: if you're busy, there's no time limit on when you put a pick in. I want you to take it seriously. When you have time to sit in front of your laptop, do some digging, make your pick. But over the course of 2-3 months, we wind up with about 7-8 mock drafts that we do. And then there's all sorts of consolidated lists from the scouting services, and people will post them. So I by the end of it, I average it out, and it's funny how close it is to our list. But we've had to make rules, and you're not allowed to pick the same guy 3 guys in a draft, and but you get to kind of stand up for the guys that you like in the draft, and if you pick a guy in the top 10, he's going to move up on the average list. So it really, without fighting each other at a table, it's a good way of getting your players prioritized. So it's been a lot of fun. I can share it with you at some point, and I will say it lines up pretty well to sometimes it's where our list is, or you look a year later and it's where we felt they were going to be. But I find the way that we've done that draft, it's interesting. Sometimes we'll do most of them with just 4 or 5 Jeff Bateman, John Winstanley, Charles Abbott, myself, and Ryan, but we'll also include the bigger our scouting group too. So it's interesting just from some of the things that they'll hear around the rinks. Well, they're hearing this guy's going to go early, so I'm going to take him here. So the different looks at it, like if we did the same 5 guys, after 2 drafts, you'd get a pretty good idea of who likes. But when you can mix in the other ones, it makes a pretty robust list. It's cool.
And then the influx of the Americans, is that just... It's the year, and it's really strong. Are they doing something in USA Hockey that Hockey Canada or the OMHA or Ontario OHF not grasping as well? Or
I mean, listen, I think the biggest thing is that if we go to take the U.S. development, the national team camp in the summer, I was shocked the last time I went, because now you see San Jose Junior Sharks pants, Dallas Junior Stars pants, Arizona Junior Coyotes, like you're going from a couple states that were really hockey heavy to now every state is playing hockey, and the game is growing at such a rapid rate in the states that, like most of the things, the resources, there's a lot that they have, and from the high schools to some of the different programming. But I just think it's not that Canada slipped or anything. I just think that the
USA is growing.
Unconventional states in the U.S. has really been growing, and I think it's great for hockey. From our standpoint with the draft, it's something that we might look at down the road. We just felt like with the speed of when this kind of rule came in, if there was a player that we felt was going to play for us next year, it would have made a lot more sense.
Yep.
And we had some guys that were later on that we might have taken a flyer on. But like I said, when you have Ontario guys who are getting pushed down 4 rounds, we just felt that the value was there. And for me, like that, it's having a plan for anybody you draft. So the guys that are going to be with your team next year are easy, but you don't have so much control if a player's going to play junior A.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, we want to figure out more about that development system in the U.S. But
which league are they going to go play to develop, and what's the quality of it?
Exactly. And then what opportunities are there for a guy that has intentions to go to the OHL, right?
Yeah.
Because that's another thing that you got to watch for is they're trying to win their own championship. So they're not so much
worried about what happens
about how players are developing for the North Bay Battalion.
Yeah.
So, it's a big puzzle piece that
and ever evolving too.
Exactly. Well, that's the league's it's changing with the NCAA, and it's about how you can do right by the players, and I think a lot of leagues are figuring that out right now.
Something I'm noticing as my kids are going through and seeing the number of teams, associations that are there, and then sometimes that desire for the parents to, whether it's boys hockey play AA or AAA, girls to play AA, and are there sometimes too many teams, and therefore the talent's being kind of watered down a little bit and spread out, and it's hard to get enough best on best for you guys to make enough. I mean, that's why there's scouting services and video, but
it's tough being a hockey parent. I think when I was coming up, it's probably tougher now. There could be an argument for too many teams. I feel like there's unfortunately being Canadian, there's a lot of experts on hockey.
Yeah.
And whether you've played it, watched it, coached it, just been associated, everybody seems to have an opinion, which it's different than most other professions. Like, I could tell you what I think about banking. I don't really know banking. I leave that to the banking professionals, right? But everybody in Canada seems to have a philosophy on how to make a good hockey player. So, unfortunately for that young kid, you're getting pulled in a lot of directions. And that leads to a lot of people wanting to have their own team. I do think that in some cases North Bay specifically, we don't have enough ice for all of the rep teams currently. So I've always thought it would be great to kind of consolidate resources, get some analytics, and see where the strengths are at certain age groups, and maybe have a bit more of an approach that's a bit more guided by the numbers. But in Canada, we have a long history. Like I can say, in Ontario, there's 7 different governing bodies in hockey, and they don't work together. And they don't, so you deal with a lot of, each one of these governing bodies has a board that has a lot of reasons why they got there, but their own reasons. So it's, we'll see. There's open borders now, which it'll be interesting, but I believe that, it doesn't really change that much from you put a good program together and you focus on the right things, then I don't think that parents, well, not all of them, I shouldn't say that. I don't think parents want to advocate as much if they have trust in the program, trust in the process. And, but it's a mixed bag all over.
I've always felt like from that open borders thing, and it'll be really interesting to see how all of it plays out, but that it does force the association to provide a good product. And it also eliminates that whole it's politics, my kid can't make the team. Okay, well, your kid can go try out here now, or they can try out here. A little harder up here as we're spread out. I just spent the weekend down and visiting family in Southern Ontario, and you're a Trauma boy, so it's, if you didn't like this, you go 5 minutes over here. You don't like that, you go 5 minutes that way. It's a little harder up here. Some major decisions having to be made by parents. But
I'll tell any parent the same thing though, is like regardless of the environment, like you learn so many things just signing up for sport, and I think that's really what you got to focus in on. There's so many uncontrollables over your career. I can tell you that when we're looking in the GTHL, because they do have that many options, it doesn't look great if you've been on 5 different teams in 5 different years. We're kind of going to predict what the next 4 years look like. Well, I'm predicting that you're going to change teams a few times. And that doesn't work well for my livelihood. So I think that, the biggest thing that I find at our level is when there's a disconnect in the expectations. Like our job is to try and help the players figure out what they're going to be for the next level, and if they can forge a career out of it. Not everybody gets to play on the power play. But if we feel like this is your best chance, and you're killing penalties, and you got to be strong defensively, but you think that no, I need to be a power play specialist and just save me for the shootout. Well, that's not going to line up. So I find that, if you're a parent of a young hockey player, the best thing you can do is make them competitive and coachable. And that will take them a long way, not just in hockey, in every other profession. So if you were to treat hockey like every other profession and, you go through a process, if you use that same process for hockey, I think it can work. But everybody is an expert.
We had a podcast interview with you on the Echo Essentials where we talked about your background and your experience getting drafted, and we're going to link that. So if you wanted to know a few more stories about you, we have that already. I wanted to know about what players you have that you think NHL teams should be looking at this year.
A lot more than NHL Central Scouting, but that's another story. I can tell you that I'd be remiss if the first name out of my mouth was not Mike McIver. I think just based on what he did last year in the playoffs, I thought he was our MVP this year. I mean, Ethan Procession, obviously they were co-MVPs, and they're two different sides of the puck. So I'd say your offensive MVP and your defensive MVP. And Mikey just, I don't love looking at the numbers, but like he was over 500 on a team that was 6 games under 500. His save percentage was in the top 5 of the league, which we had a lot of new D. And for me, just I played for the London Knights, and I am a Leaf fan. Goalies have to have a tough mental makeup to play for either of those teams, and for me, Mikey excels in that department, and he's a guy that makes everybody around him feel better about making a mistake, because he's back there. He's just been a rock for us, and he should have gotten drafted last year. He's big enough in my opinion, but that would be the only knock, because he's not 6'5". But in my opinion, the way he moves, the way he thinks the game, the athlete that he is, I just don't see how he doesn't get picked. He should get picked this year. Interesting about him is he's not actually a southpaw. So we caught him throwing the football with his right hand this year, which is also his catching hand. But he decided that when he was a young kid, since he shoots right as a player,
he's just
going to do that. So he catches with his right hand, which, thinking about it, kind of makes sense, right? Because you more catch because you throw with your right. But if you were to catch without throwing, you'd probably want to catch with your right hand, right?
I absolutely agree, because I've had that where I'm catching and throwing, and I'll do it with one hand, and then I'm going on the ice trying to catch and wondering why I can't catch a puck that well. It's like, well, this feels normal. And then the same thing for shooting. So I've always kind of wondered how that came about. And I mean, for me, it was, I don't think my parents were going to be going around trying to find the hard to find full right gear.
Right. So, I mean, listen, it's worked for him. And I just think that's Mikey. He's an athlete. He doesn't care how he does it. He's going to be a part of the team. He doesn't care about his stats. He just wants to win. And that's I couldn't start that conversation without Mike McIver. I think that the two names that we have gotten the most calls on would be Liram Amidovsky and Shamar Moses. Liram's game has just evolved so much, I feel like, over the year. And I do see him being a guy that's going to be one of our offensive leaders for the next couple years. But I think what you saw this year is probably what he looks like at the next level. Like, he can score from any line. He's physical. He's a pain to play against. And I think now that he's getting reps, he's starting to figure things out. I think in the back half, him, Iggy, Pazzi, and Nick Wellenreiter, they just really formed some great chemistry. And, we've had a couple guys the last few years. If you look at Dallin Wakely starting with him, then you move on to Anthony Romani in his 17-year-old year, Ethan Procession his 17-year-old year, and now Liram Amidovsky in his 17-year-old year. They're all kind of same point-wise. And then the other three guys, knock on wood for Liram, they've kind of exploded after that with just some advanced minutes, some more. So we feel like Liram has the potential to really have a big outburst next year. And there's so many other things that he does that make him a really attractive player for an NHL team. But I think that he can play on any line. You watch the NHL playoffs right now, and he fits perfectly into that style of game. So he's a guy that I think that a lot of NHL teams would want. I mean, Shamar Moses, we got him. He was a guy that we really liked in his NHL draft year. And what was really encouraging is when we first saw Shamar, when we traded for him, I couldn't believe how skinny he was. And he must have dropped 30 pounds this offseason and really just committed himself to getting himself in shape. Now, with that, now it's to build up the muscle, the next step. So I thought that he there's so much skill that Shamar has. He's a natural leader. He has a meanness to his game. I think that now, a big summer ahead, that he's stripped off the baby weight and now he can add some muscle on. I think his game's only going to evolve. And I think it's important to understand, like Liram went through it last year, but he came from U18, which his season would have ended in January. The OHL is now 20-minute periods. You're getting more minutes. You're now going every day in practice. Shamar did play in the league last year, but it was very limited role. So this year we played him on the power play, the penalty kill, 5-on-5, and we leaned on him, and he was able to handle a lot. I thought he fizzled a little bit at the end. I think he tired, to be honest. And I think that's, from having the summer where you cut down so much and then you play more minutes than you ever have in your life. And it's an emotional strain when we ask of you as a leader to, have some accountability. And I thought he handled it really well, but I think that next year is going to be a really big season for him. So look forward to seeing what he can do. I mean, we had the other guy that was on the draft list was Jonathan Kapajaritis, who I thought really came on at the end and just, he got in at the end because we needed him, and we needed some offense, and we needed some puck movement, and that's what we brought him in for. And he finished his season with Coburg. We just kind of said, hey, we might be able to get you in if you want to come up. He was up here right away. He actually billeted at my house for a little bit, so I came home the one day. He's playing hide and go seek with my daughters, and he then was shooting pucks in the garage with my son. I said, we did bring you up to play hockey, so maybe you can get some rest. Like, you could say no to these kids, trust me. But just a wonderful kid, wonderful family, and I thought he got better every opportunity that he was with us. He is deferring his scholarship, so he's going to be with us next year at least, and we'll see from there. But he's a guy that I think if he plays with us all year, maybe he's further up on that rankings sheet. The other one I'll mention is Aaron Enright. I thought we really missed him in the playoffs. I thought he was a guy that, he's a difference maker. And even hearing it from some other coaches in the league that their players just do not want to play against him. And he's only 17. I think that's what's crazy is he's knocking guys over, and it's his first year in the league. Yeah. And, he's a kid that comes from a great hockey family. He comes from good, solid habits, and I think what he's learned this year, he's really going to take into the offseason and come back, ready to really intimidate the rest of the league. And it's funny because you always think big, tough defenseman is fighting right now, but like he's a great hitter, and he stops the direction of the other team's flow, which is a Bill Holder term, but something that I think is really important. But I'm going to give, like, for me, what makes Aaron really good is he can affect the other side of the puck too. And I find when you have that, let's call it body confidence, that you're not going to get knocked over. Yeah. you can hang in the pocket for that extra half second, which Ben Roethlisberger as a quarterback made a living doing it. I think when you can have your head up and see what's coming at you, you can make that head fake late. He's got a wicked shot too. So I think he's going to be able to create some offense over the next few years as well. And those three guys would be the big one. I think Charlie LaRock is going to get some attention, whether there was enough playing time for him this year or not. He's just got loads of potential as a goalie. And unfortunately, we had young D and young goalies, which is a tough mix this year. So he had a great, he ended up taking the Carleton Place Junior B team, who was on the cusp of the playoffs, and he ran the table. They went to the finals. They just lost in the finals. So he was playing a good 2-3 weeks after the battalion, but he's a good young goalie for us, and he was getting quite a bit of NHL attention at the start of the year.
For the guys, and this is the guys that maybe didn't get drafted in the OHL and the guys that maybe won't get drafted in the NHL, what opportunities does that maybe present by not being bogged down by somebody's system and being trapped behind a loaded? I think you've got experience with that too, right? Like you get somewhere and there's too many guys to try to leapfrog.
Yeah, and it's one thing. There's a great stat. If you were to take all the players in the NHL and where they come from, it's like 40% is first round NHL picks, and then second round picks make up 16%. The next biggest category is 13% of the NHL is undrafted free agents. So I think it's important, and you'd think that our guys would have a bit more of a sense after going through an OHL draft and dealing that. But the NHL draft, you get a jersey. Yeah, and you want to sign. Yeah, okay? And typically you don't sign until you're 19 or 20. And what's been nice for us is we had a good string of Mitch Russell. Kyle McDonald, we've had a lot of free agent signings that have been 20 years old and didn't get drafted. And when you have those in close proximity to your current players, it's easy to tell the story. Like, they don't want to hear about my stories but like when they see it right in front of them, it becomes a little bit more real. And I think sometimes not being drafted is a superpower that you don't realize until you get to the gym and are a little pissed off to show them, right? So really the opportunities now for a young player, like with the NCAA eligibility too, is if you can kind of, and that expectation piece comes in again, but if you can just, regardless of your circumstance, focus on getting better and finding ways to do that, whether it's in the gym or after practice or whatever it may be, then those are the guys that if you can survive a little bit of the adversity and continue to get better, the opportunities, they do come. Yeah.
When you're ready, when you guys are ready to actually take them on, or when an NHL team's ready, if you've been working that whole time, you're going to have that advantage. And North Bay's got a great history going back all the way to the very first year with Goudreau being, and Brazo too?
Braz signed an American League deal, but he signed with the Marlies and
heard his name last night in the Minnesota game. So, lots of those guys.
Get a nice contract, I think, his next one.
Good for him. Yeah.
Yeah, you need those stories, though, because I think the one thing I've appreciated the most in my time, just, I played junior hockey. I was a player at the net, but like to see it now, like our players are going through everything for the first time. So they haven't had a chance to appreciate what experience means. Yeah. But then if they go to the playoffs, you go back to the playoffs, you're like, oh, I'm not as stressed. Yeah, that's experience. So, they, a lot of the time is trying to get them to use our experience. Yeah. Right. Instead of falling on their face, which sometimes has to happen too.
Feels like parenting.
Yeah, it's a lot like parenting.
Ben, we need to do a fact check. Has Donald Trump put a tariff on Canadian players yet? Just kidding. My opening into the NCAA eligibility.
I like that.
Let's talk about the details that people should keep in mind when they hear, they got more opportunity down there. But what comes with that? And give me some background.
So I think it's really important to understand that there's been there has been some amendments to CHL standard player agreements as a result of an NCAA change. So the NCAA has had these longstanding rules in place with regards to eligibility, and they've since changed those rules. So, up until November of this year, a CHL player would have been not deemed as an amateur athlete, and a couple things would have classified that. But I think what they've done is they started to get challenged on it a bit because there's a lot of similarities. And, what they did was eventually they changed the rules. So now CHL players are eligible to go to a NCAA Division I program as well as play in the CHL without losing that eligibility. So we've had to educate ourselves quite a bit on the NCAA process and the different admissions requirements because, again, not our rules, and the rules aren't consistent across the NCAA. Some have to write SATs. Some have different requirements. There's rules for players that turn 21 while they're still playing junior and how it relates to their eligibility. So in an effort to really just best support our players, we've really kind of tried to do a lot of Googling. College Hockey Inc. is a resource that the OHL has taken on. Call a lot of the relationships that, up until November we were competing for players. And now, why don't we work together? Because you're going to want some players, hopefully, when we're finished with them. And, we have a book on the players from the time they're 15. So I'm happy to help. And, it's been a good process and you learned a lot about it. But really just trying to support our players. Now, on the flip side, some things have changed because there are still rules for eligibility. So, the OHL had playoff bonuses previously. Would deem you ineligible. So we're trying to navigate it as best we can without putting any of our players at risk and make sure that they have all of their options available to them. But, what it's done from a player perspective is I'd say that there's no more line in the sand when it becomes, from the OHL draft until you become university aged. The OHL WHL Quebec League is your best pathway to now not only get an NHL contract or an NCAA division scholarship. So prior, you would have had to make a decision. So, what we're seeing is there was guys that if they didn't have an agreement with us by the time they're 17, we wouldn't see them anymore because if they would have made the team at 18 or 19, they might have thought, well, I only get 2 years of major junior, and now I can't go to the NCAA. I might as well try and shoot for the NCAA. So now, 4 or 5 years, you could play in the NCAA. So now for me, the best thing is, we've seen guys like Owen Van Steensel, for example. I thought he's been very close to getting, he was invited to Pittsburgh's camp last year. For a guy like him, going to a place like Clarkson, and it's not that these opportunities weren't available at U Sports. Guys can get better at U Sports and have gotten better and moved on to pro. I think from the player perspective, there's a lot more shiny new toys available. And, a lot of the NCAA programs, they get scouted and, a bit more heavily than, let's say, U Sport. But for the player, they seem a lot more motivated to now continue all their pro habits to get better because you've got another 4 years of runway to showcase yourself. And, it'll be interesting how, all the leagues around it are going to, the developments after. We'll see. I think it's going to take 4 or 5 years for all the trends to really eke out. But I mean, if you're a player looking at the CHL, I think for our league, it's a great thing. I think for the NCAA, it's a great thing. And the leagues that have been feeders to both those systems are going to have to make some adjustments on how they do business. But certainly, I think there's a lot of good players that are being moved around and shuffled at this point that got to figure out just how it's going to all fall together.
Have you found any misconceptions that you think people should be aware of that's important to keep in mind?
Well, I think, first of all, there's a lot of differences in the two. I don't necessarily think the NCAA and CHL compete as much as they have in the past. If you look at the NCAA, the average freshman is going in at 19, 20, 21. So really, it's in most cases, it's after your junior eligibility. I think, there's some rules in our league that restrict us from having big rosters. So we don't have a ton of guys sitting out games where, your roster at the NCAA, it's set at the start of the year, and there may be 30 guys, 18 get to play. And there's half the games that we have in the CHL. So it's a different program altogether. And then I think the other thing that, it's gone are the days where you get a scholarship and you're there for 4 years. to an NCAA program. The transfer portal has been something that's been big the last couple of years, and it's just shuffled, not only players coming in, but forced some to go out. So I think if you're a player, it's great to have a runway, but finding a place for those 8 years just became a lot more competitive in both the CHL and NCAA. So, do your homework. I always say to the guys that are looking to go to U Sports or to the NCAA, if you're going to go to school, you should probably think about the programs you're going to take too as part of your decision-making process. You don't go to school to play hockey. Go to school to go to school. And if, hockey's the means to get there, then that's a great thing, right? And if you can play at a high level, then even better. But there's a school for everybody. That's something I've definitely learned throughout this process.
And it's different in Division 3, Division 2, and.
Yeah, so Division 2, I don't know that they've had much hockey anymore. Division 3, I could be, don't quote me on this, please, but just talking, I don't believe that they have made the same amendments to their NCAA eligibility rules. So I'm not 100% on that, but I know that, it would be one of those fallout situations where we didn't think about that. No, let's look at this avenue.
I remember talking to parents and looking into stuff, and one of the big surprises was when you talk about going to the States and realizing that even a full scholarship isn't the end of the cost, right? There's a lot of money involved.
I think it's important to realize that, everybody uses the NCAA scholarship. Well, it's a $200,000 scholarship. Not if you're from there, though. Just like for an American coming to, say, University of Toronto, they would pay, upwards of $40,000 a year as well. So, we talked about this earlier, but the growing game in the U.S. has really changed things for an Ontario kid, because if you're just looking at it from a business perspective, if you're University of Michigan and a kid from Michigan is going to cost tuition, let's call it $10,000, but a kid from Ontario is going to cost $40,000, you're going to go with the kid from Michigan, right? Yeah. For so many reasons. So the full ride scholarship hasn't been as readily available for the Ontario player recently, but the CHL players also haven't been available. Right. The Division I programs. So we'll see, kind of how it goes.
Interesting.
But retention may be the bigger thing that we need to look at after the player turns 18.
Do the, NIL deals are such a big talk, and obviously football quarterbacks or basketball players dominate that. I'm sure there's no way it could be nearly as high, but is that even a consideration? Are guys thinking about that? But
yeah, I've heard some things being thrown around. Even rumors of some players like Henry Muse just committed to Michigan. There's always rumors around, so I don't want to dive too much into them. But I think it's harder for a Canadian player to get NIL as opposed to an American. So that might be the only thing. And I'm not a huge politics guy, but it sounds like there may be some changes politically that's going to affect the NIL as well. But certainly, if you're a young person and you're offered a couple $100,000, it was Arch Manning. I think he was $3 million, and Brock Purdy was making $875 as the quarterback of the Super Bowl. So it's real. It's something that the schools are throwing around NIL money. I've heard rumors it may get it. It hasn't really hit hockey, to be honest, but I heard it could. But it's also added to the transfer portal, where now demands are being made. And
now it's a whole thing of trying to figure out, who do I need to go to? What do I need to talk about?
Exactly.
So
I know you're on the clock today, so I wanted to just give you one more chance before we wrap up to tell us what fans can expect with the battalion going forward.
Yeah, well, you know what? It's I really believe in, and we have development camp May 2nd to 4th, so I'd encourage anybody to come out and watch. We're going to host a town hall as well, where we want to be more interactive with the fan group and allow season ticket holders, anybody to ask any questions about all avenues of the team and business. But I think it's going to be our most competitive training camp that I've ever been a part of. Just looking at the roster right now, we got 4 goalies that could play in the OHL we have 10, 11 D that can play in the OHL. We have 15 forwards, and lucky is that it's us that gets to make the decisions, but we have some tough decisions to make and who's going to fill those spots. And I think it's going to be a really important summer for us, and just not only our players, making their gains, but there's a lot of players now that are becoming available just that weren't, and there was 87 players drafted into the OHL, but those are 15-year-olds. There's 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds that, some teams have avoided for a couple years that are now looking to play in the best league before pro hockey in the NCAA. So there's already been some, and this is NCAA teams saying, hey, we've got 200 new 20-year-old CHL players available. I need to defer this guy. It's way easier if I can help him find a place. Are you interested? So that was a Nick Wellenreiter situation, who's going to be back as well next year. And there's just in that relationship building, there's been a lot of names that have come our way. So we have to kind of now try and sift through how we make those decisions, because like I said, we have a team that's returning outside of your overagers last year. We feel like Cam Warren is ready to hit the ground running and impact the team right away. We've got an import pick. We've got Ryder Cali, who fans didn't get to see. He's still playing. He's in the finals right now of the OHL playoffs. Nick Kapajaritis, he's coming in full time too. So we only had 3 guys leave. So it's some good problems, and I think ones that, to be a good team, you want to have. But we've got some work to do for sure before we hit the ice.
Well, it should be an exciting spring camp there at the Gardens, not this weekend, but next weekend.
That's right.
Right on. And fans can go check them out and make your own decisions and compare them to the top brass. Yeah,
and we're going to have it's something we've done the past couple of years, but we've been playing during development camp. But our 16-year-old players, so our 08s, your Ryder Carey, Kent Greer, Parker Vaughn, they're going to be out there as well. If Ryder Cali's still playing, he probably won't, but if he's not, he'll be there. So you'll get a comparison of guys that have actually played in the OHL and those guys that are trying to break in, which I always find the green helmets kind of set the measuring stick.
Yeah.
So they're going to be there, and we've told them, you got to help us with our evaluation. So you can't take it easy on the new guys. So it's a good competitive camp. We do orient the players and the parents as well, because if it's your first time moving away from home, there's so many things that we have to cover and show off. North Bay, but I love the weekend. It goes by quickly, and there's a lot that we accomplish, but it's going to be a really good camp. And like I said to you prior, there were some guys that maybe had written off the OHL that are all of a sudden now looking to come back and compete in the camp, because whether you're 18, 19, or 20, this is the best league now to get the NCAA scholarship. So
right on.
It's exciting times.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad we had you in. Thank you very much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Anytime.
And next year, I hope our sports casts have a weekly sort of feature of a player talking about what's coming up, and that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, we would love to do something like that. That would be awesome, because it's, I don't think people realize, you got to put the program together for a 16 to 20-year-old. They're not seasoned pros, so any opportunity that we can get them, this is a great experience, so we would love to do that.
I think you guys have made leaps and bounds just in terms of the impact with the community. Anybody that's been around the team has definitely felt it.
No, I appreciate it.
And heard great things. So again, congratulations to you, and keep it up. And obviously Steve Batonti's done a huge amount of stuff as well.
Yeah.
With the promotion, the in-game stuff. So I think fans have a lot to look forward to, and all those experts that we have in North Bay about hockey will be
we love
there
experts,
to share their opinion.
And that's where, what I'd say to anybody that has a strong opinion, or I'd love to chat about it. Don't feel like I'm unapproachable. I know during the games I can look pretty
intense. Yeah.
That's because it is tense when you don't get to play. But I'm always happy to talk hockey. It's my favorite thing in the world to talk about, and I'm happy to talk shop anytime. So that's what kind of the purpose of the town hall is. If you have questions about the ticket, if you have questions about any in-game experience, if you have questions about the team, we want to answer them all. And we're not afraid to talk about them, and happy to do so. So
excellent. Mm-hmm. Well, you've been listening to another Echo Sportscast Spotlight. I screwed up the intro.
I thought it was great, though. You had a really good introduction of it.
Yeah, it was a great introduction, but I introduced the show wrong. It was Sportscast 32.
Yeah.
This is the Spotlight, but I'm sure you'll forgive me, and I don't care if you don't. Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, and share. That helps us out. And We'll see you next week.